Listen, baby, ain't no mountain high, ain't no valley low, ain't no river wide enough, baby.
If you need me, call me, no matter where you are, no matter how far.
Don't worry, baby.
Just call my name, I'll be there in a hurry. You don't have to worry, 'cause baby, there ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough
To keep me from getting to you, baby. Remember the day I set you free. I told you you could always count on me, darling. From that day on, I made a vow. I'll be there when you want me, some way, somehow. Oh, baby, there ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from getting to you, baby. Oh, no, darling.
No wind, no rain, or winter's cold can stop me, baby.
No, no, baby.
'Cause you are
If you're
my
ever in trouble, I'll be there on the double. Just send for me, oh, baby.
My love is alive, way down in my heart, although we are miles apart.
If you ever need a helping hand, I'll be there on the double, just as fast as I can. Don't you know that there ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough.
Keep me from getting to you, babe. Don't you know that there
Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough, ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley
When I wake up in the morning, love, and the sunlight hurts my eyes, and something without warning, love, bears heavy on my mind. Then I look at you, and the world's alright with me. Just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day. When the day that lies ahead of me seems impossible to face, when someone else instead of me always seems to know the way, then I look at you, and the world's alright with me. Just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be.
Hello, everybody. We asked AI how many chairs we needed for this panel. Sorry, that was a joke. Welcome. My name's Jeff Brock. I'm the Dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Science, and I'm here with three good friends and two soon-to-be good friends, visitors, to discuss AI and its evolving use and impact. So artificial intelligence is no longer a frontier technology. It's become infrastructure from enterprise software to consumer products to the capital markets funding it all. AI is reshaping how companies are built, how decisions are made, and how value is created and distributed. But the speed of adoption is outpacing our collective understanding of its implications. Models are growing more capable by the quarter, startups are compressing what used to take years into months, and investors are placing enormous bets on which applications will endure and which are hype dressed up as innovation. So this panel will bring together voices from venture capital, enterprise product leadership, and AI-driven investment strategy to examine the state of AI as it truly is, not the headline version, but the version being built, funded, deployed, and pressure tested right now. So welcome, folks. I'll ask you to go down the list and introducing yourselves. If you could think about your response to the following question. Each of you is engaging with AI from a different vantage point, building it, funding it, deploying it, or investing in and around it. In a sentence or two, what's the most important shift you've seen in the AI landscape in the last 12 months?
Do you want us to introduce ourselves also?
Go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then you
Thank you.
take a crack at the question.
Hi, everyone. I'm BG. Did a PhD in computer science here many years ago, and till recently used to run a venture fund called 8VC. And as of this year, started O1 Capital on my own, working on AI-enabled services. Should we do the intros first, Jeff, and then respond? What's the right thing to do?
Perfect.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm Donald Fisher, most recently co-founder and CEO of Tidelift, where we focused on open source software supply chain security, an area that's been deeply impacted by the advent of AI. And before that, involved in a number of investor roles at a couple of venture capital firms and Davenport 99 undergrad.
Neil Talani. I'm a general partner at TCV, which is Technology Crossover Ventures. We're a growth equity firm focused on scale technology companies across consumer and enterprise, and transition to the public markets over a long duration. Most proudly, I'm a Yale graduate, 04.
Gwen Cheney, Calhoun, now Grace Hopper, 2001. I'm also a director at Connecticut Innovations. I run their $50 million AI quantum fund. I'm both a VC and an operator, so I also have my own AI drug discovery company and scaled it to $1 million ARR and won a global competition. What else? Previously a partner at Khosla Ventures and ran 3 different accelerators, so there's definitely a builder in me as well.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. David Boss. Been building Maple Media for the last 8 years. We're in the top 1% of app publishers on the App Store and Google Play. And built the business by rolling up about 40 different lower middle market mobile app businesses. So excited to talk about apps and how that world is radically changing as AI comes for us. So.
All right. Most important shift you've seen in the AI landscape in the last 12 months?
The models are getting powerful. China is producing high quality open weight models. That's kind of driving stuff, but I would say adoption in the enterprise is happening quickly. It's unclear. It's a little bit unclear about ROI and token costs. That's why software engineering especially gets impacted. I'm personally looking very deeply into the services consulting and BPO area, looking at the areas of roll-ups, but also around how AI-based tech transformation will affect the services industry, and it can have profound consequences on states like New York, California, Florida, Ohio. So it's not just about India getting affected. A lot of the services industries transformations will affect employment and skill sets in the US also. So from a space perspective, it's a really important space for me to focus on.
Donald?
Yeah, so I think the most notable development from my perspective in the last year, really just in the last 6 months, is the impact that AI is having on software development as a profession. During the last 6 months, from just before the holidays, the advent of some of the models that came out, the Anthropic Opus model that came out late last year, it really tipped over this line from useful, sort of useful, mostly gets it right tool to gets it right almost all of the time and can write most of the code. And that has, the major tipping point was right around the new year, I think, when people look back at it. But now it's very much in the mode where a lot of sophisticated development teams that I talk to now, including within my own organization, say, we don't write code anymore. We direct agents. We're not manually writing code anymore. So that's a really profound shift that has happened very rapidly. And it has really deep impacts on, both the efficiency, the efficacy, but also the psyche of software developers, people who came up as programmers. I've heard the term mourning used to describe the feelings that come from the loss of, that professional skill set. But I also think it's a moment of incredible opportunity that we haven't quite figured out yet. Like, what is the new way of engaging with these tools? And I'm very optimistic. I believe that there's an amazing future for computer science and the software development profession, but it's different now. It's way different, and it just happened and is still unfolding.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, maybe to dovetail to these answers, we're sitting here in May of 26, so exactly a year ago. If I ask this audience what Anthropic does, I think 5% would accurately describe it, including myself. And there was almost an obsession in May of last year with consumer utilization at the query level. Enterprise utilization was very nascent. Anthropic at that point had disclosed that they had roughly $1 billion of ARR, and publicly have said that they were close to $30 billion as of last month, with other folks, estimating in the public domain that it was much higher than that, with 85% of that at the enterprise level and 50% of that being coding application based. And as a result of launching Cowork, trillions of dollars of market cap lost for enterprise software companies in the public domain. And so 12 months has defined a lot. And as you could, hear from BG and Donald, actually it's having significant application. It's not just rhetoric at this point in time. And so a lot has happened in this year. It'll be intriguing to see what we say a year from now. It's hard to predict, but I think it's fair to say that folks who thought that the knowledge layer would be a commodity layer have had to transition their thinking.
Okay, so before the panel, I advocated that we have dissent on this panel to keep everyone awake because it is 3 to 4 p.m. I did not get an agreement to create dissent, so I am on my own on this. So I have many thoughts on this. So I've only joined Connecticut Innovation 6 months ago. I've made 4 investments. I did not think I would invest this quickly, but the more companies, I've vetted and screened almost 350 companies. I invested in 4, so the ratio is not high, but the 4 that I'm investing in, the revenue growth is phenomenal. The product sold itself. So the company, the seed stage company that I'm leading in right now, 2 technical founders, hired 3 engineers, no sales experience on that team at all. And they scaled to almost $500,000 ARR already in less than a year, almost a year. So, and it's just because the product is good. And you have these enterprises that are, scaling up their contract from $40K to $215K without salespeople urging them to do that, right? And so I think that's one of the things I'm seeing in AI from versus 12 months ago is you can build your product really good and it just sells itself. So that's the product-led growth that people have talked about. The second thing that I'm seeing that is very different, 6 to 12 months ago is The smaller distilled models are getting really good. So this might be similar to what Donald is talking about. So if you look at just Gemma versus Gemini, Gemma is 95% the level of Gemini, right? So if you want to optimize tokens, use Gemma. And I'm sure other, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic are doing the same thing. I think the third thing I'm seeing is, I think 3-4 years ago, the whole AI for drug discovery space was still hope. The models are getting better. So the second derivative is getting better. I'm super excited about that space just because, the joke is we want an AGI and we have chatbots, right? Where's our, disease curing medicine? Where's our new material? We are getting closer. And I think, until we get there, we're not going to realize we're there. But I do see that the second derivative is getting better.
Great.
On the consumer side, to talk about that a little bit, we're seeing a couple interesting things going on. So, as Neil mentioned, there's been a huge shift, with ChatGPT sort of leading on the consumer side, Sora, the video app, cutting big deals with Disney, and then seeing that Anthropic was coming for them and backing away from consumer and focusing on the enterprise. And we've seen that in our products, we play in the space. We have apps like a top weather app on the App Store, top calendar app, collage making, things like that. And, we're in the same space as apps like Strava, Duolingo. These are consumer products, and we make most of our revenue through subscription on the App Store. And Apple has a big cut of that as well, a huge, I think it's 100 billion ARR business for them. So there's a whole fundamental aspect to the consumer software subscription economy that's really being threatened by LLMs being able to basically do everything that an app store could. But are consumers ready for it? And we're, seeing the big guys go after enterprise business applications. And what we're seeing in some of our apps when we bring AI features to the consumer is that not everybody is so excited to use that new shiny AI thing. And we've launched a lot of different AI features, and there are a lot of folks who say, how do I turn it off? And so that's interesting to see, the voracious appetite on the enterprise side, and a little bit of reluctance, especially if it's in a workflow that somebody already has. My example of the week is I was helping somebody upgrade their inbox, and Gmail was throwing all these AI suggestions in for like a 2-sentence email, and there's a recap at the top that's longer than the email itself. So there's some of that rubber meets the road on the consumer front. And while the vibe coding era is very much here, and it's never been easier to make an app, a mobile app especially, I think there were 30 or 40% more apps submitted to the App Store this year in the last 12 months compared to the previous. So the market as a user is flooded with a lot of new products and services, some of which aren't that good or are kind of barely stitched together. So that creates a very wide range of reactions and perspectives from a consumer perspective on what that landscape looks like. So lots of different and interesting dynamics there.
Jeff, can I make a quick comment about a couple of points? Is that okay?
Go ahead.
I think to Don's point and to Gwen's point, I'll just throw a couple of anecdotes out there. On the enterprise side, I don't know if you guys know, I think a bunch of us have written about it. I think ROI and token cost are very profoundly hard questions. And right now, if you just draw the economic food chain, just for software engineering, if you draw it out, everybody is getting paid and making margins at the hardware layer, energy layer, land layer. It's not clear when OpenAI and when the three large model companies today, there are three, Gemini, Anthropic, and OpenAI, when are they going to actually charge to make a margin? It's not clear. So if you look at what happened last week, our old friend from LinkedIn, I'm an old timer from LinkedIn, is now the CTO of Uber. He's put a freeze on all usage of, the engineers cannot use the big coding models anymore. And Satya from Microsoft has put a stop on usage of Anthropic coding tools also. And it's all about ROI and budget tokens. So that's an important point, that nothing comes for free. When you bring in something so disruptive and you start 17 coding sessions in parallel, the piper has to be paid. So that's one point. The other thing is, in Silicon Valley, if you work on the data side and the eval side and the RL environment side, and you look at what Gemini is doing, Anthropic is doing, and OpenAI is doing, they're all building virtual personas. These are the RL environments where they're building DevOps engineers, data scientists, data analysts. These professions could be profoundly affected by that. So I want to bring it up because we're sitting in the mothership at Yale because of education and training. So that stuff is going to probably hit us over the next 2 years, 3 years. Now, whether it's going to be cost effective, we don't know. So I just want to bring up the question of ROI and token cost that will get iterated on, and that will hit us in the next 2 to 3 years also.
Yeah. So I thought I was going to be the dissenter as a mathematician here at Yale University, but you probably have all seen announced recently the breakthrough that OpenAI had on an 80-year-old combinatorial geometry problem called the unit distance conjecture. And apparently this, with one of their new models, was a one-shot prompt solution where the prompt was either disprove this conjecture or prove it. That was the prompt. And it was, it's an example where it doesn't really clearly have an application in the real world, but it's a fairly simple to state problem, and I'll just tell you what it is. So you take endpoints in the plane, and you're looking for sets of endpoints where you have the maximal number of edges of distance 1 between them. And there was a conjecture, which is that the square grid was the maximal as n goes to infinity configuration, and it blew it out of the water. It came up with a family of examples that disproved the conjecture. So this is the first real example from a mathematical perspective where not only is a new insight being offered, but it's a new insight where 80 years worth of attempts to solve this problem were made, and none was successful. So I just offer that as an example where, relative to the obvious consumer impact, the obvious technical impact behind the scenes, that there's a sort of a scientific transformation brewing as well in terms of how verifiable, reasoned solutions to problems are being offered by these systems after, and then I would go back to what was different a year ago. It was sort of like talking to a sycophantic grad student that didn't really know anything about your work, and all of a sudden, they're going to be pointing the scientists in the directions that they're supposed to go. So again, I thought I was going to be the dissenter, but it's a real question. I agree. How much are we going to have to pay? And are universities in a position to pay for these advances? So I have some sort of specific individual questions for each of you, but I also welcome jumping in and countering. So Donald, your company was recently acquired by Sonar, which sits at the intersection of code quality and developer tooling. How is AI changing the way software gets built? And are we at a point where AI-assisted development is producing better outcomes or just faster ones?
Just for the record, I never thought a square was the right answer to that. I'm glad that I've been validated by OpenAI. So yeah, I talked a little bit about how software development is changing, and I think it's really a complete, upset of the apple cart situation where not only is the practice of writing code changing, but also all of the ancillary patterns of organizationally how the best performing companies build software beyond just the code itself, right? So over the last 20 years, there's been a whole pattern that has come into play. So-called DevOps or SecDevOps, security developer operations, sort of looking not just at the development of code, but then the testing of it, the deployment of it, and so on. And whole billion-dollar vendors across the that spectrum of software development tooling. it's all in question now, because when you move from developers working on a timeline of hours to days to weeks to an agent and an AI model-powered agent working in a millisecond, sub-second window, generating code, checking it, testing it, adjusting it. The entire tooling landscape needs to be rethought and reconsidered. I mean, it's to the level where I've had some conversations now. I mentioned many high-performing teams, world-class teams, are not hands-on with the code anymore. They're hands-on with an agent, instructing the agent. They're increasingly not even looking at the code that much. And now the question is coming to the forefront: do we even need visible programming language code in the way that it has traditionally existed? Do we need Java or JavaScript as an intermediate representation between the intent and the executing software? Maybe we don't need that step anymore. If nobody's going to look at it anyways, it's kind of an overhead step. We can go straight from specification or prompt to running code, and then that's a whole new world that we got to figure out how we're going to work in. So, I think it's a really profound moment for the discipline of software development and computer science. But some things remain true to the point of, are we just going faster with worse outcomes? The ability to generate unlimited amounts of code feels like it's eventually going to have a comeuppance, right? Someone has to govern or manage that, or something has to govern or manage that code, and there's some kind of a balance that needs to be found in the middle of all of that.
Indeed. So we'll come back to the question of what you guys all think we should be teaching our undergraduates here. Maybe I'll hold that one for the moment. So David, where do you think AI is making the biggest difference in how you build product, engage users, or operate at scale? And where has it underperformed?
Yeah, so a couple quick anecdotes on this. So we built the Maple Media business by acquiring different already existing app businesses. And we were doing this in 2017, 18, 19. And the way that you would go about doing this, any kind of go-to-market, sales, M&A process is just so radically transformed. We continue to be acquisitive and kind of tuck in other different app businesses as we go along. We have a big business in podcasting, so we picked up a lot of independent podcast apps. But that whole process, I'm sure you've all seen a lot more pretty well-written, targeted sales emails hitting your inbox. But that whole world is kind of transformed, and the noise to value ratio is really rapidly changing. So, I mean, today you'd have agents who would look at data on the App Store that's public and assess, each business and prospect and bring people through the whole process of acquiring a business. And you could apply this to any industry in a totally different way. So I think that's really interesting and exciting, because if you are going to, do a go buy a business or do a roll up, it's a pretty radically different way to go to market compared to what it was not too long ago. In terms of the product development process, similar to what Donald was talking about, we have built a platform to manage the 100+ apps that we have in the App Store. But again, we are ultimately still operating in a studio model, which means that the product and business folks get together, think of cool features or metrics they want to move. Then the engineers code it, or the designer designs it, the engineers code it. It's tested and then released, and we look at all the data that comes out. And one of the most radical changes is that a lot of these tools and AI functionality, augments development, as Donald has talked about, augments testing, and certainly augments the analytics. Analysis that used to take a couple data engineers a week or something like that can now be done in minutes. So that's pretty radically powerful. The whole product process of what should we build or how do we build it is totally turned on its end, because the former constructs of how long something takes and how much development time it takes are now completely broken down. So that's compressed, and so the scope of what you can take on is pretty dramatically accelerated, and that has a lot of different ripple effects. That said, and I'll go back to the M&A point, we actively talk to companies who are, there's a lot of opportunity in this just because we're still looking at companies that are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for outside development resources. So there's a lot of opportunity to elevate or optimize, and you see a lot of funding going towards, whether it's a software business or a more traditional business, a lot of capital flowing into the deployment and implementation of AI operations into every vertical. So there's a lot of excitement there for how businesses can evolve and be more efficient. So that's interesting to apply to any space, and we're certainly seeing it in ours. There's still a lot of folks who are kind of doing it the old way, so we're kind of constantly evolving our process. While still keeping an eye on quality and craft. That would be one of the shortcomings, is that some of our tools and technology for managing our portfolio of businesses are right there, pushing the bleeding edge, and are saving a lot of time and adding a lot of value and making creating great impact and features. Some are just kind of propped up marketing and AI functionality that the big companies are kind of slowly moving the ship. So there are times when we go all in on a particular tool set from a vendor or partner, and there are other times where the team is saying, this is not really any different than something that we're doing already manually, or we can just point Gemini API or something like that at this, and it's going to do way better than what this kind of existing company is trying to offer. So those are some of the things that we're seeing, and how that's changing some of the structure of how things are built, both in terms of a M&A engine as a investor and then as an operator of a digital business.
Great. Thanks, David. So Gwen, you're deploying capital in a CT fund focused on AI and quantum. And I guess it might be fair to say AI and quantum are sort of advancing at somewhat asynchronous rates. Do you see the development of AI as having an impact potentially to accelerate development in quantum?
So the stock performance of quantum and NVIDIA were very correlated last year. They might have decoupled this year. I haven't looked as much, but last year I was definitely noting what is going on here. And I think it's just, Jensen did take a 180 where before last year he was negative on quantum, and then he realized there has to be a next and better GPU, and that might be the QPU, quantum processing unit, right? And so, I was just at a quantum panel before this where the panelists talked about there probably will be an integration of QPUs and CPUs and GPUs, right, and classical compute. So I do think that's going to happen. When I was pitching quantum, I did not say that the TAM is 100% of compute. I said it's probably 10% of compute, but compute will grow, just like we talked about Jevons paradox that everyone's talking about, right? Is as compute gets cheaper, as tokens get cheaper, we'll just use more of it. So our total bill of paying for tokens and compute will probably go up, even though each unit will go down. Each unit cost will go down.
Do you see AI accelerating development in quantum, though, in terms of the...
It depends on what aspects of quantum. I would say the hardware is very difficult. I think people don't realize that a lot of quantum is the wiring, right? It's the copper, it's the stuff that you still need humans to make. As much as robotics have advanced, it's not there. Just the customization of those wiring is it's unit by unit. A lot of it is still done by electrical engineers. Yale has a great EE program, so we've benefited from that. So I think in terms of quantum, the compiler on the software side, absolutely. I think their AI can be helpful. One of my friends is trying to build, using AI to build CUDA for quantum. So I'm always talking to this friend of mine, hoping to invest, but people are definitely working on that.
You have no idea the sense of relief my engineering dean's heart just felt at that response. So Neil, TCV has backed some of the most consequential technology companies in the world. how is AI changing your investment framework? And are you evaluating companies fundamentally differently than you were 2 or 3 years ago?
Well, in a sentence, it's really hard
Yeah.
to evaluate these companies. So I feel more humility every single day that passes now. I would say, because we are later stage oriented in particular, there are some criteria that have stayed very similar in this world of change, right? So, we've always said we're going to back the category leaders that have in any market that are the system of record, that have proprietary data, and that have a context of discovery that can be more virally based. And that's for consumer or enterprise. Now, those are fancy sentences, right? And so the thing that we're now challenging ourselves that much more on is, what does a system of record mean? It's going to be consequential that any AI native solution be able to read to or write from that system of record. What does proprietary data actually mean? It's a fancy term, right? But if that data can be replicated by an LLM very easily at the consumer enterprise level, that creates substantial risk. And then, on the discovery side, this is probably logical, but clickable volume for SEM has gone down 50% year over year. I think we're just at the beginning of that. And so really the context of discovery and the prerequisite need for virality is high. So those are the similarities. I would say the humbling part of all of this, and you can get this right or wrong, and it's harder for us to get wrong because we are later stage with a more concentrated portfolio, is, one is the existential threats are super high. I mean, think about the number of vertically oriented AI native companies that have been founded and backed at tens of billions of dollars of valuation. And then you have Cloud Cowork emerge at the vertical level, effectively being able to substitute for that when those vertical AI applications are wholly reliant on the knowledge layer for their development. Right? And that can happen in February, just like that. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that those companies necessarily will die, but there's a big work through around that. The second is it is very difficult to understand what retention rates are going to be at the consumer enterprise level. Some of that's already been commented on. But at the consumer level, you're getting tons of discovery, and at the end of a year, you could have 10% retention rates. I wouldn't get deceived from growth versus quality of company. That's not a quality company at that point. So that's a real prerequisite need to understand. And then this goes to BG's point. The third is, no one really knows what the ROI is. Right. I would say it's the biggest shortcoming in the board decks and the board discussions that we have today, and it's acknowledged by the CEOs. It's not a criticism. Utilization does not equal ROI. And so my sense is, over the next year or two, there's going to be some reckoning around that, where you're going to have, I wouldn't presume that we're not going to, exponential growth will just continue to persist unless that is solved for critically. And I would say most enterprises today are not well situated to adopt open source that would lower the cost substantially. Only the AI native companies that have 0% gross margin have a prerequisite need to do that, right? Just to have a viable business model. Core enterprises of normal scale, hundreds of millions of revenue, are not yet ready to do that. And so we're going to have this interstitial point that's going to be difficult to fully grok until that ROI is managed. I mean, maybe somewhat sadly to a lot of us in the room, the hardest ROI measure today is human mitigation. It's been labor costs. It hasn't been at the revenue layer just yet because no one knows how to ascribe it. It exists, but the attribution is weak.
Can I add something to the? I think so ROI is kind of an overriding theme that will play out. Currently, I would say there are two drivers. Neil, I'd be curious, because you work on consumer finance a lot. I think governance compliance for regulated industry. Regulated industry, if you look at banking, financial services, healthcare, everybody adopted ML let's not forget that for the last 12 years, they have used machine learning models, maybe for anti-money laundering, know your customers, risk underwriting, building underwriting models. It's been there. But there's a whole ecosystem around ML, around governance, compliance, and observability that took time to build, so that the government, so that the policy can say, hey, you've made this loan decision. Show me the breadcrumbs that led to it. Right. So I think ROI, and in the short term, because regulated industry, if you look at how, say, Palantir built a lot of their large accounts, it was all in regulated industry. Regulated industry comes with a lot of policy compliance, governance burden. These machineries and ecosystems around LLMs have to be built yet. Right. The software stack, the human-in-the-loop stack, doesn't exist. And the human, so we discuss models only, but when you go actually build businesses and companies, you find out that the people and software ecosystems around these models is becoming much more important. There's the whole debate around open weight. Remember, open weight models cannot be built by companies who don't have either massive balance sheets or are representatives of nation states. You just can't build them because you can't have that much data and compute available to you over a period of 10 years. That's why China has succeeded. And Meta tried and failed because of internal problems. So I would encourage all of you to think not just about the models. If you listen to what Neil is saying, you have to think about ROI, you have to think of compliance, governance, you have to think of how do you override stuff. Overriding LLM decisions is complicated. You will have to build harnesses for that. Anyway, it's pretty exciting. It's making us rethink the entire human and software stack across all the departments, I think. Back to you, Jeff.
So my next question was for you. It's not unrelated to what you just said. But which industries do you think are the most underestimated in terms of AI's near-term impact?
I'd tell you if I know, man. I don't know. I think I would encourage you guys to think bottom up a little bit rather than make a grand pronouncement today and then just leave for San Francisco after I say something. I would encourage all of you to think about two things. What are LLMs good for? One is they're good for workflow automation. So take any industry, any department, think of a multi-hop workflow where a human being is involved. Complex decision-making, if-then-else statements. LLMs are good at doing straight-line automation or even figuring out the path of how to do that automation. So that's an important takeaway. The other thing LLMs are really good at is they will help you make sense of unstructured data quickly. So a lot of this stuff around LLMs comes from working on text. LLMs are not good for multimodal stuff. For video images, they're not as good. For text, this whole next token prediction stuff has worked really well, starting from BERT, this model that Google came up with. So I would say any industry and department, the reason I mentioned services and consulting and BPOs is, it so happens in services, whether it's for software, it's for accounting, it's for clinical trial, it's for travel services, every department has enormous human touch on a series of decisions and some data flows through. You go right into a system of record. So if you have workflows like that, it turns out LLMs can automate them really easily with a little bit of human-in-the-loop stuff. Second is they can make sense of unstructured data. If you look at where the revenue for two companies, Snowflake and Databricks, will come from, they have made their business on structured data till now. All of you might know what S3 is, or a blob store is, or what a data lake is. Data lakes with unstructured data will be the biggest thing in the future because most of unstructured data in the enterprise, if you look at a company like Glean, it could be email, it could be a Slack transcript, it could be a series of PDFs, Google Docs, PowerPoint, SharePoint. Everything is going to find its way into these data lakes. Why? Because the LLMs at a reasonably cost-effective way can make sense of it. So instead of making a pronouncement about which industries will be affected, I actually don't know the answer. Any industry and its department where you have multi-hop workflows which are important for making money, not just to cut cost, and they work around a system of record, to Neil's point, and if they do a lot with unstructured data, those departments will be profoundly affected. That's kind of a bottom-up answer.
Anyone else want to take that one?
I'll take a dissenting view. So I think The sectors that would be most easily impacted by AI is actually sectors where there is easy ground truth, right? So the reason why coding was one of the first sectors is you can compile the code, press enter, see if it runs, right? So you can get ground truth very quickly. Did this work? So the other question people would ask is, well, why did AlphaFold work? Because they're solving for minimum energy. They're solving for stability. So there's also ground truth there, and it's easily calculable, right? Easily meaning within a few hours, not a few years and a few $1 billion. That's not calculable. And then the other thing about workflow is you have human reinforcement learning that clicks yes, no, like was this helpful? Yes, no, right? Was this accurate? Yes, no. So I think if you think about it that way, then the sectors that AI would go into makes a lot more sense.
I completely agree, by the way. I don't know why.
I actually have a dissent on the AlphaFold one, though, which is, I think part of the reason AlphaFold was as successful as it was decades of protein structure data coming out, a lot of it New Haven, Connecticut. And a pitfall of it is that protein structure work has effectively stopped, because it's so easy now to answer within the realm of available protein data deep questions but it's not advancing the frontier anymore. So there's a sort of inherent pitfall there where all of a sudden you're sampling rather than building anew.
I have an unfair advantage because this is what my company does. So it is true that AlphaFold 2 worked because it had 200,000 protein structures, 3D protein structures, that's been built over 20 years, right? And that was public PDB, protein database. So it was public data that AlphaFold 2 was able to train on and therefore win CASP. I was able to get my model to work on RNA with only 500 structures. So this is what I mean by the models are getting a lot better. We're not perfect yet, but the second derivative is so much faster.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question, an interesting one. The only thing I would say is maybe contra an SF comment is, so I think a lot of folks and entrepreneurs are still chasing growth. And we said it earlier, but growth right now doesn't necessarily equal quality. And so some of these end markets where you can have the most profound impact with AI, and BG, you mentioned some of them, financial services, utility end markets, where we've made now a number of investments across both. We've made them specifically within the context that if AI is applied, frankly, to tech laggard industries that are regulated, you can actually not only have the most impact, but you can have the most long-term durable adoption in those particular markets. The consequence of that is that they're lumpy and that adoption cycles are not within the calendar year that you launch. And so I think those will be some of the most consequential companies that will exist. They just may take longer in order to garner adoption in these more tech laggard markets. But if you have the patience, they will actually have more durability and sustainability and probably be less prone to vertical disintermediation by the frontier models over time.
So there's been a lot of discussion about the future of work and what exactly the net effect, maybe after taking into account ROI, on various kinds of job markets will be. Do you have sort of general thoughts? Are you optimistic, pessimistic about the disruption of the workplace?
Show of hands. Are folks here founders, meaning you're creating the disruption, or you're workers trying to adopt AI in your daily work? First or second? First, raise your hand. Who are the founders? Who are the disruptors? Okay, who are the folks trying to get up to speed with AI and use it in your daily work? Oh no, we're about 50-50. So I will not make...
Change your answer.
Yeah, I can't... So now I can't I will piss off half the room either way. What was the question again?
Are you optimistic or pessimistic? I think you still have an out about the future of work.
I am AI pilled. I run an AI fund. I have an AI startup, right? So just, level set here. I think what's common, and to Neil's earlier point about returns and growth, is so I'm investing in 4 AI companies. I would say then they're in very different verticals. One's an infra company, the other 3 are apps companies, right? Nothing in common. I would say that the only commonalities are 2. All of them can build really fast, and they've also scaled very quickly in terms of revenue, and they're also very cash efficient. And the third thing is they're quick, just quick in terms of replying to answers, adapting to what the customers are looking for. One of them expanding market to market, and they're expanding according to customer demand of which market to go to, right? And so I think if you're trying to be, I am very optimistic if you're able to go with the flow and adapt to how AI is changing. And I'm speaking from my own experience here, and I have looked at what happened to Harvey, right? Harvey's one of these companies, unicorn, and then Anthropic comes out with, we can basically do what Harvey does without charging you anything. It's already part of your Anthropic monthly subscription. So that danger exists for every founder, right? You can wake up, the joke is, as a VC, is every day I wake up trying to read the news to see which one of my companies went to zero. But if you can grow profitably, you have less of that problem, right? I don't want to invest in companies that incur $1 billion to build a model and then risk that model not being useful. If you can spend $1 million making a model and your first year you already make half of that back in ARR, you have much less risk there. So that's another way of adaptability. So the other example I'll give you is I'm an active coder. OpenAI Codex would freeze me out after 6 or 7 hours. That's how many tokens I use. And I realized this is definitely not a feasible path forward, right? So I created Claude Skills. So I use both of those models. So Claude Skills will essentially make the code for me, and then my agents call that code, so it executes the code, which costs me no tokens. So that's one way I've had to adapt. And so that's the other example of adaptability that I urge everyone to do, whether you're a founder or adopting AI. Is that a happy answer?
It's I'm much happier. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I'll add that it's good to know the split of the room, because if you're a founder or builder, there's a lot of reasons to be really, really excited, because it's never been easier to build so quickly and to scale so quickly. And if you have a product that offers transformative value, then people are going to flock to it. The growth is there. The other exciting thing is that there was a panel earlier with some folks who had exited their businesses, and I think that one of the maybe underrated aspects of being able to build sort of an AI-first company is that you can get really, really big with a small team and maintain a lot of the culture, velocity, and through sort of an AI OS for your business, you can set a lot of rules that allow your company to kind of stay on the rails and steer it in the direction that you want it to go. Whereas, historically, growth has been constrained by headcount at a certain point or compute, and you have to sort of further delegate or further abstract your vision and velocity, often most importantly, because of that. So that is super, super exciting. And, there's, more companies that are coming out with, in medium-sized or very large enterprises that have, a team of 1 or 5 or 10 that are building enormous businesses. So that's a huge opportunity for everybody who's building right now. For those, and that's something to be excited about, for those who are kind of integrating the process, I think that one of the things to not get discouraged by and to stay engaged around is that kind of mourning that Donald was talking about earlier, is to be aware of and actively, open to change, and not just sort of, the general narrative of you're going to lay the groundwork for the redundancy of your function. So to become a power user of these tools to augment and accelerate what you as an individual are able to do and manage is really, really powerful. And you don't want to miss the opportunity to do that. The groundwork for that is being laid right now. And so figuring out what that means for you and your segment of the market is something to be really excited about and a challenge to take on.
Can I add another optimism point?
Yes, and then I want to ask a concluding question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So to Jeff's earlier point about the Erdish problem, the reason why that solution was very exciting for me is that it combined algebra and geometry. And you would think, why wouldn't you, right? You took those classes in high school. But when you get to the very senior levels, like, the math professors or, folks that win Nobel Prizes, they don't really talk to each other that much because they'll talk to people in their specific fields. So it was actually pretty ingenious that, I think this was OpenAI, was able to combine the two and come up with a very unusual solution. If you look at the solution, you would think, if I got a algebra person and a geometry person together, force them in a room for 5 days, they would come up with this. But you didn't have to do that, right? Is that the model was able to do that. I'll give you another example that's near and dear to my heart is in drug discovery, you have to get so many people, experts in different disciplines together. You have, the notorious, AI scientists that only want to sit in front of a computer screen. You have the lab scientists that will only wear their lab coats and stay in the lab, right? And so those two groups are very difficult. They don't speak the same language. And then you also have the medicinal chemists and the FDA IND approval folks that talk to regulatory folks, right? And so these are just 3 simple categories, different types of people with different training it's hard to get them to speak the same language and to work together. But with an AI model, it just happens, right? It's not perfect yet, but there's no forcing teams to talk to each other. They do. So, these are the things that makes me really excited about AI. I would say the other good thing about AI is it's replacing tedious work. That's what Claude Skills is. It's replacing tedious work, right? And so I really think of AI as releasing us from the tedious work so that we can, be more creative and be upper level in our thinking, right? Nobody wants to click around the same buttons 20 times a day, right? And so that's why I'm excited.
I would just add to that, I think there's a certain type of tedious work that was actually created by computers. And it's nice to see some of that go. Question, maybe I'll start with Donald. We haven't heard as much from you. And maybe this can be our final thought for the panel. And it's a self-interested question. We're still teaching computer science courses here at Yale. Should we be?
Yes. I'm not sure, but I think yes. And the reason why I think yes is that, it's just things are moving up a level of abstraction is how I think about this as a trained computer scientist, right? So we had, in the old early days of computing, everything was, punch cards, then assembly language, then higher level languages. Now the programming language is natural language. It's English or other languages, right? But there's still a necessary skill to understanding how to specify these systems, especially when you get to really complicated enterprise organizations, 1,000-person organizations. It can't be all just vibe coded off the cuff. It's not going to work together when it all composes and turns into an ongoing system. So I do think that there's a need for understanding the fundamental concepts of system design, of algorithmic design. I don't know, when I did my computer science degree at Yale, it wasn't really all about learning how to program in Java syntax. That wasn't the part that we did that, right? Yeah, that was sort of implicit. But it was about understanding the conceptual structure of these systems. That I think is gonna continue to be valuable. And to this positive note, I think these tools just allow individual humans to have such greater ambition to apply those skills to build more and greater things.
Vijay, go ahead.
It's a profound question. I don't think it's just about computer science classes. So I think something you and I have talked about a fair bit when you helped start the Roberts Fund, is students coming out of undergrad or even less so grad school, I think have to start developing much more flexibility of learning. They have to be able to learn existentially, for existential reasons, be able to learn new skills faster. That's an easy thing to say. How to make it real in a college, I don't know the answer. That's number one. Number two, I think pushing themselves to think as entrepreneurs and builders is really important. So those two things. In terms of the fundamentals of computer science, I think systems thinkers will always be around. I'll give you an anecdote. A couple of us old-timers from LinkedIn, we were very early there, and I've gone through many iterations of building and running large engineering teams. I wrote a blog post a couple of months ago called AI Writes the Code, but you still carry the pager. And if you look at, it's really instructive for computer science professors here to study how are team structures and culture changing in engineering, in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. There's a profound change going through. People are now hiring bimodally. So they want a few very senior people who are system architects and domain experts, and they want very young people who will generate the code. It's like an experiment that's happening. Nobody knows the answer. So I would say these are secular changes happening that have to be brought to the campus somehow, something that you've talked about. In terms of Don's point, 100% agree. People have to be able to go and understand complex concepts. The reason we took theory classes, the reason we studied and understand Eisenstadt, the reason we took Mike Fisher's class, all of these are gods of our department. Not just because we learned parts about cryptography, we learned how to think, how to reason, how to write proofs ourselves. That doesn't mean in my career that hasn't helped, but the process of going through complex thought patterns has helped. So I'll just leave it at that. I think every campus has to go revisit these themes really soon. I'll just leave it at that.
Just quick responses. Neil?
I think the application will still be very, very high. There will be, I think, a prerequisite for adaptability, so I give you a lot of credit for being forward-thinking on that. But whether you believe, if you believe more with more, this is like the term now, if you believe more with more, that's definitely going to mean more engineers generally. If you believe more with less, then BG makes a great comment, and I was at a recent Morgan Stanley conference where Sam Altman was speaking, and obviously those two companies are speaking to more of this human mitigation level with high ROI. But even in that context, if there's a single individual managing hundreds of agents, that's not mutually exclusive with more. And secondly, you have to have a know-how of thinking and a technical ability to get the most out of that. And I don't think it's going to create, there's not going to be homogeneity across those folks managing that N of agents. So I think that the prerequisite will continue to be high.
Gwen, David?
This is much easier said than done, but teaching kids how to think critically I think that's more important than how to use a tool, right? Because the tools will change very quickly. I'll give you a personal example, so you can blame me. I was a declared CS major, but I didn't finish the major, and it was the compiler course. And I realized that I was spending 90% of my time, which was a lot of time in CS courses, looking for the missing parens, because I was taking these courses from 1997 to 2001. If I had just been 2 years younger, a better compiler would have come out and caught that missing parens and saved me 90% of the time. And that's actually exactly what's happening with AI right now. If you think, AI is replacing our jobs, no, it's replacing the tedious work you don't want to do, right? And so, but my favorite courses in CS were algorithms, data structure, because it taught me how to think, right? And so earlier I just talked about how I'm using Claude skills to write some of the code, and then the agent would call the code instead of burning credits. I'm doing that because I learned that in data structures, right? Here's a template that I can just call it, and it rushes through the next step because I've already done this step before. This is what I mean by learning how to think, rather than learning any specific tool.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah, it's the same answer
less
said
work.
differently, that curiosity and problem solving are timeless and essential for innovation and building businesses and creating change. So those are the things to cultivate. And to BG's point, and talking to some other educators here today, how that is reworked into the education at all levels is a big open question as well, to maintain and cultivate that, and not just there's a big New Yorker piece about how pervasive cheating is and how easy it is to just solve math problems by pointing your camera at it. So we have to cultivate that curiosity and problem solving, and that's going to really carry forward a lot of great things in the future.
Thank you all very much for this stimulating discussion, and thank you all for being with us here today. We're grateful. Oh, they want a picture.
Listen.